In the vast plains of the Masai Mara, a tiny cry pierced the golden savannah, a sound so desperate that it stopped even the most seasoned wildlife experts in their tracks. A lion cub, barely 4 months old, lay gravely injured, alone and fighting for its life. This is not just a story about survival, it's a story about courage, compassion, and the invisible threads that connect humans and wildlife in Africa's wild heart. If you believe in the power of wildlife conservation and the incredible journeys of animals in need, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this story. Every click helps bring awareness to the delicate balance of life in the African wilderness and the heroes working to protect it. The midday sun cast its relentless heat across the golden plains of the Masai Mara, making the horizon shimmer like a mirage. Dr. Emma Sullivan's binoculars hovered over the undulating grasses, her trained eyes scanning for movement, a flash of tawny fur or a ripple of life. For 8 years, she had patrolled these lands as a wildlife veterinarian, learning to interpret the subtle signals that betrayed distress in the animal kingdom. But today, the cry that pierced the savannah was different, sharper, higher pitched than an adult lion's roar, yet heavier than a cub's playful mooing. It carried urgency, a sound threaded with pain that no seasoned tracker could ignore. Emma froze, instinctively bringing the binoculars closer. Her heart skipped a beat as the faint figure of a cub came into focus beneath a small acacia cluster, partially shaded from the blazing sun. The cub's movements were weak and jerky. Every attempt to lift its head seemed to drain the last reserves of its tiny body. Emma's pulse quickened. Caleb and Dungu, her trusted colleagues, followed her gaze. Caleb's hand instinctively went to the spotting scope mounted on the research vehicle, his eyes narrowing as he focused. Emma didn't need to see through his lens to know. The cub's face was marred by a wound so severe it could have been fatal. From above the right eye, a deep gash ran across the skull to the base of the ear, raw and angry, the surrounding fur matted with dried blood. Flies clustered hungrily over the exposed flesh, drawn to the scent of infection. Emma felt a pang of helplessness, quickly replaced by determination. The cub's cries echoed faintly across the plains, pitiful and desperate, a call for help that only a human with the tools to intervene could answer. "My God," she whispered, passing the scope to Caleb. His eyes met hers, grim with understanding. "Could be a kick from a zebra, maybe buffalo, or even a territorial male," Caleb said, shaking his head. "Whatever it was, he won't survive long in this condition." Emma's lips pressed together as she surveyed the surroundings. Conservation rules were strict. Interference in natural processes was generally forbidden. Nature demanded balance, sometimes brutally so. A pride might abandon a cub that was weak or injured, conserving its resources for those with better chances of survival. The evolutionary imperative was cruel, but essential. Still, Emma's training as a veterinarian instilled in her an instinct that transcended protocol, the compulsion to save a life in immediate peril. "Where's the pride?" she asked, scanning the open plains. "They were hunting near the river yesterday," Caleb said. "The cub might have been separated." His voice trailed off. Both knew what the silence implied: abandonment, whether natural or enforced by circumstance. Emma's gaze returned to the cub, trembling as it attempted to rise again. Weakness pinned it to the ground. Time was a luxury they did not have. "Radio base camp," she ordered. "Tell them we've got an orphaned cub with a life-threatening injury. I'll assess and intervene if necessary." While Caleb prepared the radio, Emma assembled her field kit, methodically checking each component: gloves, antiseptic, strong antibiotics, pain medication, and sedatives, all carefully calculated for a cub of approximately 15 kilograms. She contemplated the possibility that euthanasia might be the only humane option if the infection had spread too far, her chest tightening at the thought. Beyond the ethics of intervention lay the harsh reality of human influence on the ecosystem. Habitat encroachment, dwindling prey populations, and poaching had blurred the lines between natural suffering and human-induced tragedy. Caleb's voice crackled over the radio as he confirmed with base. Dr. Kimani was on standby at the medical facility, ready to assist if transportation became necessary. Storm clouds gathered ominously on the northern horizon, a reminder that the Mara's weather could be as treacherous as its wildlife. Afternoon thunderstorms had become increasingly common, a symptom of shifting climate patterns. They would need to move quickly. Approaching an injured wild cub was risky. Emma remembered a past incident vividly. A seemingly abandoned buffalo calf had nearly gored her when its mother charged unexpectedly from cover. She scanned the area again, this time for predators attracted to the cub's plaintive cries. The tall grasses and scattered shrubs could conceal both danger and prey alike. Only once she was satisfied that the surrounding landscape was clear did she signal for a cautious approach. The plan was simple. Drive the vehicle to within 20 meters of the body, then proceed on foot. Caleb would maintain an elevated lookout from the truck roof. Emma's gaze softened as she observed the cub's fragile body. His coat was in relatively good condition, suggesting the injury was recent rather than a symptom of prolonged neglect. His ribs protruded slightly but not severely, another clue that separation from the pride had been a recent event. The cub's amber eyes flickered toward them, filled with fear, befarming, and defiance. Weak as he was, he attempted a low warning growl, a pitiful display of strength against overwhelming vulnerability. "It's okay, little one," Emma murmured under her breath, though she knew her words held no meaning in his world. Still, she hoped the tone, the intent, might offer some reassurance. When they were 15 meters away, Emma signaled Caleb to stop. The cub's growl intensified, body trembling with effort. Emma prepared a dart loaded with mild sedative, enough to calm the cub without full immobilization. She needed to assess the wound in detail before deciding the appropriate intervention. Caleb's expression was tight with concern, his instincts honed over years on the Mara. "Something feels off," he said quietly, scanning the horizon. "The wound doesn't look like any injury caused by predators I've seen before." Emma studied the pattern, a curved laceration with unnaturally clean edges. The possibility of human involvement loomed. "You think it's poaching?" she asked, voice dropping. Caleb's grim expression confirmed her fears. Recent reports of poachers in the northern sector, along with snares discovered near the reserve's boundaries, painted a troubling picture. Lions, once spared from targeted hunting, were increasingly caught in the crossfire for their bones, teeth, and claws. Cubs were especially vulnerable, sometimes stolen for exotic pet markets or traditional medicine trade. If this cub had survived such an attack, the situation was more complex than either had first imagined. Emma made her decision without hesitation. "I'm going to sedate him and bring him in. He needs proper treatment immediately. If there's evidence of poaching, authorities must be notified." Caleb nodded, resolute despite the tension in his features. "I'll watch your back. Go carefully." With precise movements, Emma loaded the dart into the projector, taking care to minimize trauma. The cub flinched at impact, yowling briefly before the sedative took effect. His head drooped, eyes partially open, still tracking her movements. Emma's heart ached at the sight, but she kept her approach steady, gentle, deliberate. Up close, the extent of the injury was horrifying. Dried blood and scabbed tissue surrounded a wound already 2 days old, with early-stage infection creeping across the exposed skin. The clean, straight sections of the laceration confirmed Caleb's suspicion. This was no accident of nature. Someone had tried to cut the cub's scalp, likely for illegal trade. Emma worked methodically, cleaning the surrounding area, applying temporary antiseptics and strong antibiotics. The cub trembled under her touch, yet seemed to understand at some instinctual level that she was there to help. He emitted a soft, rumbling sound reminiscent of a domestic cat's purr, an almost imperceptible signal of trust in the midst of agony. When the crate was ready for transport, rain began to fall, quickly turning into the downpour typical of the Mara's wet season. Fortuitously, it would wash away scent and tracks, offering a layer of protection if poachers remained nearby. Emma gently lifted the cub, whispering, "We'll call you Simba. It means lion in Swahili, and you'll need all the strength that name carries." The cub's amber eyes met hers briefly, full of vulnerability, then drifted closed as sedation held firm. As they drove back toward the medical facility, mud-slick roads tested Caleb's skillful driving, every turn a potential hazard. Emma monitored the cub's vitals through the crate, tension coiling in her chest. Infection was advancing, stress and dehydration were evident, and every second counted. Yet, for the first time, hope flickered. If anyone could save him, it would be Dr. McKenna, the continent's leading wildlife surgeon. The sun dipped toward the horizon, lightning flashing faintly over the distant hills. Within that moment, Emma felt the weight of responsibility and possibility converge. One small, injured cub had set into motion a series of events that could ripple far beyond his own fragile life, touching conservation, human awareness, and the very future of the Masai Mara. The air was heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth as Emma carefully guided the transport vehicle closer to the cub. Each movement was measured. Any sudden motion could trigger panic. Caleb's eyes swept the surrounding grass, scanning for hidden threats, while Dungu monitored the horizon from the roof of the truck. The cub, barely able to hold itself upright, attempted to rise once again, its small body trembling with the effort. The low warning growl it emitted was pitiful, a display of strength too weak to be effective. Yet it spoke volumes about the cub's instinct to survive despite overwhelming odds. Emma prepped the sedative dart with meticulous care. The dosage had to be precise, not enough, and the cub might thrash and worsen its injury. Too much, and the small body could be overwhelmed. She inhaled slowly, steadying her hands, and aimed for the hind quarter, where muscle mass would absorb the medication safely. The dart struck with a soft thud, and the cub flinched, yowling briefly before the sedative began to take effect. Within moments, its struggles ceased, its head drooping, amber eyes half-lidded, but still aware. Emma approached slowly, murmuring gentle reassurances, a voice soft enough to bridge the divide between human and wild predator. As she examined the cub up close, Emma's professional detachment mingled with a visceral surge of compassion. The wound was horrifying in both size and nature. Dried blood and matted fur framed a bitch that ran from above the right eye, curving unnaturally across the skull to a partially severed ear. Swelling in the early stages of infection confirmed that time was against them. This was not merely a natural injury in him. The curved, clean lines of the wound suggested deliberate human action. Emma's chest tightened at the thought. Poaching was no longer confined to ivory or rhino horn. Lions, once spared the direct hand of human cruelty, were increasingly being targeted, their bones, teeth, and claws coveted in illicit trade. Cubs, with their vulnerability and relative docility, had become the most dangerous targets of all. Caleb's observation confirmed her fears. He had grown up alongside the wilderness of the Mara and had an instinctual sense for its rhythms and threats. "It doesn't match any predator attack I've seen," he murmured, voice low. "The edges, they're too clean, deliberate. Someone used a blade." M. nodded grimly. The implications were chilling. The cub might have been abandoned after a poacher raid, left to survive alone if the perpetrators had moved on. Every instinct screamed that intervention was necessary, but each step carried risk, not just from the cub's weakened and potentially defensive reactions, but from human threats that might still be nearby. The Mara was vast, but poachers often knew its patterns, and the approaching storm could mask movements, hiding potential dangers in the flickering shadows cast by lightning and rain. Emma set to work with precision. She gently cleaned around the wound, carefully removing dirt and debris without aggravating the cub's pain. The small body trembled beneath her hands, yet a subtle shift suggested the cub sensed her intentions. He emitted a soft, almost domestic-sounding rumble, a sound that stirred something deep within Emma, a fragile signal of trust between human and animal. She applied a temporary antiseptic dressing and administered antibiotics and pain medication, carefully monitoring his reactions. Securing the cub in a transport crate was the next challenge. Emma lifted him delicately, feeling the lightness of his frame beneath her fingers. He weighed less than she expected, a further indication that he had likely been without proper nutrition for days. Caleb had prepared a soft lining of blankets in the crate, ensuring the cub would have cushioning for the bumpy journey ahead. Rain had begun to fall in earnest, its rhythmic drumming masking the sounds of their activity and fortunately obscuring their tracks from any potential poachers still in the area. Once the cub was secured, Emma leaned close, whispering, "We're going to call you Simba. It means lion in Swahili. You'll need every ounce of strength that name carries." The amber eyes flickered open briefly, meeting hers with an awareness that felt almost human, before drifting closed again under the sedative's effect. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders. This was no ordinary rescue. Every decision in the next few hours could mean the difference between life and death. The journey to the medical facility was fraught with challenges. Mud slicked the dirt tracks, and the vehicle slid on treacherous patches. Caleb's skillful navigation was tested at every turn, yet he maneuvered with calm precision, anticipating the shifting weight of the crate and the terrain beneath them. Emma monitored Simba's vitals, checking temperature, pulse, and respiration through the crate's side panel. Each whimper or shift sent a jolt of anxiety through her, but careful observation reassured her that the sedative was maintaining a safe, controlled effect. The medical facility appeared through sheets of rain as light waned, modern yet discreet structures blending into the savannah backdrop. Dr. McKenna and her team awaited them, a group of seasoned professionals prepared for emergency intervention. The cub was carefully transferred to the examination table, and McKenna conducted a rapid assessment. Her experienced hands traced the edges of the wound, noting swelling, infection, and tissue damage. No skull fracture or brain penetration, she reported clinically, though her eyes betrayed concern. But he's septic. Infection is systemic. We're racing against time. Emma felt the familiar tension of anticipation and professional focus intertwined with fear for the cub's life. The infection's reach meant every moment counted. McKenna quickly orchestrated the preparation for surgery, general anesthesia, broad-spectrum antibiotics via IV, and full imaging of the skull to assess the extent of internal damage. The team moved with synchronized precision, each member aware that the cub's fragile life depended on their efficiency. As the procedures commenced, Emma remained by the cub's side, administering fluids and adjusting monitoring equipment under McKenna's guidance. The young lion, sedated yet alert to touch, displayed remarkable resilience. The small body trembled occasionally, not with fear, but as a physiological response to injury and infection. Emma could not help but marvel at the cub's innate strength, a raw determination to survive despite suffering inflicted both by nature and humans. During the preparation phase, Caleb reported observations from the initial rescue site. Additional signs of predator activity were noted near the acacia cluster, suggesting that other wildlife had been drawn by Simba's cries. While no immediate threats remained, the report reinforced the urgency of securing him in a controlled environment. The intersection of natural and human-induced danger underscored the precariousness of wildlife conservation. Every intervention carried a moral and practical weight, balancing the principles of non-interference with the ethical imperative to alleviate suffering. Emma's thoughts briefly wandered to the broader picture. Habitat degradation, climate-induced shifts in prey distribution, and human encroachment had all contributed to this crisis. Poaching, although a stark manifestation, was symptomatic of larger systemic challenges. In this cub, every line of injury, every trace of infection, and every visible sign of malnutrition reflected a world increasingly shaped by human hands. As McKenna finalized the anesthesia protocol, Emma adjusted the cub's position, ensuring IV lines were untangled and monitoring equipment securely attached. The small creature, fragile yet instinctually resilient, lay quietly, the weight of sedation preventing struggle, but not the faint, natural tremors of survival instinct. Emma whispered encouragements, words she knew he could not understand but that grounded her in purpose. "Stay strong, little one. We're with you." The storm raged outside, rain hammering against the facility's roof, thunder echoing across the plains. Inside, however, a focused calm prevailed. Each movement, from anesthesia induction to initial surgical preparation, was deliberate, precise, and compassionate. The cub's life hung in the balance, and within the carefully controlled environment of the medical facility, hope flickered, fragile, cautious, yet undeniable. The fluorescent lights of the medical facility cast a sterile glow over the examination room, but the warmth of human care seemed to counterbalance the harshness of the environment. Simba, the sedated cub, lay small and vulnerable on the examination table, the temporary bandages barely containing the raw edges of his wound. Dr. McKenna, the facility's lead wildlife surgeon, approached with steady, deliberate steps. Years of experience etched into her every movement, She commanded the room without a word, her presence alone instilling focus and calm among the staff. Emma stood nearby, gloves donned, her eyes fixed on Simba's amber gaze even though the sedative held him in a half-conscious state. The cub's chest rose and fell, rhythmically, a fragile rhythm that signified both life and the immense challenge ahead. Makina's assessment was thorough. She examined the wound edges, palpated for swelling beneath the skin, and reviewed the radiographs taken during transport. The images revealed that the skull itself was intact, but infection had begun to infiltrate the underlying tissue, creeping toward the vascular system. The diagnosis was severe. Sepsis was setting in, and every moment delayed intervention increased the risk of systemic collapse. "This is going to be delicate," Makina said, her voice steady but tinged with a concern. "We'll need to debride the infected tissue, repair any damaged blood vessels, and reconstruct what remains of the ear. The infection is aggressive, but he's young and resilient. There's a chance." Emma nodded, her stomach tightening, but her resolve solidifying. 8 years in the field had trained her to balance hope with pragmatism. She scrubbed in, her hands moving with practiced precision as she prepared to assist. For a cub like Simba, every movement could determine survival or failure. The team began by cleaning the wound thoroughly, using a combination of antiseptics and carefully controlled saline washes. Emma held the cub's head gently, monitoring vital signs as Makina worked with instruments that seemed almost delicate in her hands, yet precise enough to perform near microscopic repair. The odor of antiseptic mingled with the earthy scent of dried blood, a reminder of the trauma Simba had endured. Emma fought the urge to flinch. Professional detachment was necessary, yet the sight of the cub's tiny, trembling body tugged at her heart. Once the wound was free of debris, Makina began excising necrotic tissue. The edges of the injury were jagged in places, but in others the cuts were unnaturally straight, evidence of the deliberate attack Simba had survived. Emma assisted by adjusting lighting, suctioning fluids, and maintaining the cub's temperature with heated blankets. The room was silent except for the soft hum of monitoring equipment and the occasional instruction from Makina. Anesthesia was delicate. Simba's small size made him highly sensitive to fluctuations in dosage. Emma adjusted the fluid lines, monitoring heart rate and oxygen saturation, ensuring that his fragile body could tolerate the surgical procedure. The cub's chest rose with shallow, uneven breaths at times, but Makina's experience allowed her to respond instantly to any variations, administering gentle corrections to maintain stability. 4 hours passed like an eternity. Makina's hands worked tirelessly, reconstructing the partially severed ear, stitching tissue with meticulous care, and ensuring that the infection would not spread further. Emma remained vigilant, documenting each step, preparing IV antibiotics and observing the cub's vital signs. She marveled silently at Simba's resilience, heart rate stable, despite the trauma, and oxygenation within safe limits. Not many cubs of his age could endure such an invasive procedure without succumbing to shock or infection. When the final sutures were placed, Makina leaned back slightly, allowing herself a brief moment of measured satisfaction. "He's a fighter," she said quietly. "If he recovers from this, it will be because of his own strength as much as ours." The cub was transferred to the recovery area, a temperature-controlled quiet room designed to minimize stress. Emma followed closely, ensuring that Simba's position on soft blankets provided both comfort and stability. Monitoring equipment tracked heart rate, temperature, and oxygen saturation continuously, while IV lines delivered fluids and antibiotics. The cub stirred occasionally, a soft whimper escaping him, signaling both discomfort and the faint glimmers of awareness returning to his body. Caleb joined Emma at the doorway, his eyes reflecting concern and relief simultaneously. "How is he?" she asked quietly, removing her gloves. "He's stable," Caleb replied. "The surgery went as well as we could have hoped, but he's still weak. We need to observe him closely over the next 24 hours. Emma took a deep breath, allowing herself a rare moment of relief. The cub's survival was no longer purely theoretical. The immediate danger from trauma and infection had been addressed. Yet recovery would be a slow, meticulous process. Post-surgical care was critical, ensuring he received adequate nutrition, maintaining hydration, and continuing antibiotics to suppress any residual infection. As Simba rested, Emma reviewed the details of other recent cub injuries. 3 cases within the same month suggested a concerning pattern, possibly linked to human activity, habitat shifts, or territorial disputes amplified by environmental stressors. The implications were broader than a single cub's recovery. They pointed to systemic issues threatening wildlife across the reserve. Emma's mind raced with strategies for investigation and intervention, balancing immediate veterinary needs with long-term conservation priorities. Despite the pressure, there were small signs of hope. Simba's body responded positively to medication, his vital signs remaining within safe ranges. Occasionally, he would stir slightly, pawing at the blankets, a subtle reminder of his innate curiosity and determination to survive. Emma adjusted his position gently, ensuring IV lines remained unobstructed and that he could rest comfortably. The rhythm of observation became almost meditative, a silent vigil over a creature caught between vulnerability and potential. Hours later, as night deepened outside the facility, Makina returned to review Simba's condition. "The antibiotics are working," she reported, studying the cub's blood work. "White cell count is trending downward and the wound margins are cleaner. He's not out of danger yet, but the trend is positive. He has a real chance now." Emma felt a surge of relief, tempered by the knowledge that recovery was still fragile. She had formed an emotional connection despite her professional detachment. The cub's resilience had stirred a sense of protective urgency she could not ignore. Makina placed a hand on her shoulder, offering both reassurance and an unspoken reminder to rest. "You've done well," she said. "Let the team take over for now. Observation is critical, but you need to be alert for tomorrow's work." Emma reluctantly left the recovery room, her mind oscillating between relief and anticipation. Outside, the Mara's landscape lay hidden beneath the night sky, the storm that had accompanied their rescue giving way to quiet, reflective rain. The cub's struggle was only part of a larger narrative, one of environmental change, human impact, and the delicate balance of the savannah ecosystem. Every decision taken within these walls resonated far beyond, influencing not only Simba's fate, but the broader future of wildlife conservation in the region. As she walked to her small quarters within the facility, Emma allowed herself a brief moment to contemplate the day's events. The journey from discovery to surgery had been perilous, emotionally taxing, and physically demanding. Yet it had also reinforced her conviction that intervention, guided by knowledge, compassion, and vigilance, could tip the scales towards survival. Simba's quiet, sleeping form in the recovery room symbolized that fragile balance, a testament to both the brutality of life in the wild and the enduring hope that careful human stewardship could offer. Hours passed, and Simba remained in the temperature-controlled room, his body gradually responding to treatment. Every rise and fall of his chest, every subtle twitch of his paws became a marker of progress. Emma monitored the data constantly, making adjustments as necessary and preparing for the day ahead. Further assessment, environmental investigation, and planning for rehabilitation. The work was far from over, but the first critical step, the survival of a cub against overwhelming odds, had been accomplished. By the following morning, Simba's condition showed subtle but encouraging signs. The fever had begun to stabilize, the inflammation at the wound edges was receding, and the cub had even nibbled at a small portion of a specially prepared meat. Emma remained vigilant, but the initial sense of relief allowed her to focus on the broader concerns surrounding the recurring cub injuries. While one life had been saved, the pattern suggested a larger threat, one that extended beyond individual misfortune to environmental hazards and human interference. David Chen's arrival at the medical facility changed the dynamic immediately. Tall, composed, with an air of quiet authority, he carried the weight of experience in both wildlife research and conservation strategy. Emma's chest tightened when she saw him. 3 years had passed since their professional and personal connection had drifted apart, yet the urgency of the situation left no room for distraction. David's presence was purely professional, for now, but the combination of personal history and shared responsibility for the region's wildlife created a charged atmosphere. After a brief update on Simba's status, the team set out to examine the other sites where injured cubs had been found. GPS coordinates led them across the reserve, from acacia-dotted plains to undulating hills, until they approached an unusual rock formation that had gone largely unnoticed in prior surveys. From a distance, the jagged, almost mechanical edges of the rocks were apparent, unlike the natural geological formations that typically dotted the savanna. Emma slowed the vehicle, craning her neck to observe. "That doesn't look like natural geology," she murmured. The surfaces were sharp and irregular, with angles that seemed deliberately shaped rather than eroded by wind or water. David nodded in agreement. "Historical records indicate that this area was used for mining decades ago, before the reserve was officially established," he explained. "Quarries were excavated and never restored. Over time, vegetation has covered some of it, but the dangers remain." Caleb's expression shifted from concern to realization. "This could explain the cub injuries," he said slowly. "Young lions are curious by nature. If they explore these areas, sharp edges could easily cause lacerations." Emma felt a surge of cautious hope. If the injuries were environmental rather than predatory or human maliciousness, they were preventable. This realization reframed the problem. Rather than an insurmountable threat, they faced an opportunity to intervene proactively. The focus shifted from reactive veterinary care to strategic habitat restoration. The team spent the remainder of the morning mapping the hazardous areas. Rusted metal, jagged rock faces, and residual debris were documented, creating a comprehensive profile of the environmental risks. David noted the proximity of these formations to water sources and young prey populations, emphasizing that the areas were naturally attractive to cubs exploring their territories. Unseen hazards like these, compounded by environmental stressors such as drought or concentrated prey, could dramatically increase the likelihood of injury. Back at the facility, plans for intervention began to take shape. Emma and David discussed potential cleanup strategies, balancing the ecological impact of removing debris with the need to make the area safe for wildlife. The conversation highlighted a recurring challenge in conservation. Every action in the ecosystem had consequences, and even beneficial interventions required careful planning to avoid unintended disruption. Community engagement emerged as a critical component. Local villages and conservancy members were briefed on the findings, emphasizing the need for awareness and cooperation. Education programs were proposed to ensure that children, livestock herders, and other frequent visitors to the savanna understood the hidden dangers of abandoned quarries and the importance of reporting injured wildlife promptly. By creating a network of vigilance, the likelihood of future incidents could be minimized. Meanwhile, Simba's recovery progressed at a remarkable pace. Within days, he demonstrated improved mobility, stronger appetite, and heightened awareness. The once weak growls transformed into small, confident rumbles, signaling both physical healing and the return of instinctual behavior. Emma monitored these changes closely, documenting subtle improvements that informed adjustments in nutrition, medication, and enrichment exercises to encourage natural behaviors. David's expertise in habitat management complemented the veterinary approach. He proposed a phased restoration project. First, removal of sharp metal and hazardous rocks. Second, gradual reintroduction of natural vegetation to stabilize the terrain. And third, creation of monitoring protocols to ensure the areas remain safe long-term. By integrating veterinary recovery with habitat restoration, the team aimed to prevent recurrence while supporting Simba and other cubs' natural development. As the days progressed, specialized crews began clearing debris. Rusted tools, jagged metal sheets, and unstable rock formations were removed or reshaped, and safety zones were marked for ongoing observation. The work was physically demanding, complicated by weather and terrain, but the combined effort of local teams, researchers, and conservation specialists accelerated progress. The Mara's ecosystem, once passive in its hazards, began to transform under human stewardship, not through domination, but careful, informed intervention. Educational programs were implemented concurrently. Emma and David held sessions with local guides, students, and community leaders, demonstrating how to identify hidden dangers and respond appropriately to injured wildlife. Practical exercises included tracking signs of distress, administering first aid under supervision, and understanding the ecological rationale behind intervention decisions. The goal was to empower communities to act as stewards of the landscape, not just observers, creating a culture of conservation that extended beyond the immediate crisis. Throughout this period, Simba became a symbol of the project's purpose. His recovery was monitored not only as a veterinary success, but also as a living demonstration of the ecosystem's fragility and resilience. Emma spent hours observing him, noting patterns in behavior, energy levels, and response to stimuli. Each day he grew stronger, his amber eyes brighter, his curiosity evident in every cautious exploration of his enclosure. The cub's progress was a tangible affirmation that intervention, when thoughtfully applied, could yield meaningful results. The collaboration between Emma, David, Caleb, and Makina revealed another layer of insight. Conservation required more than medical intervention. It demanded interdisciplinary strategies, from veterinary care to habitat science, community engagement, and policy advocacy. Lessons learned from Simba's case were documented for application across the reserve and potentially for other regions facing similar threats. The incident underscored the interconnectedness of wildlife welfare, human activity, and environmental stewardship. Weeks passed and Simba's rehabilitation reached a critical milestone: controlled exposure to natural conditions within a safe, monitored area. He demonstrated instinctive hunting behaviors, agile movement across varied terrain, and social interactions simulated through enrichment exercises. Emma documented these behaviors meticulously, preparing a detailed profile for eventual reintroduction into the wild. Each success reinforced the effectiveness of integrated conservation measures, from surgery and veterinary care to habitat restoration and education. Finally, a comprehensive assessment indicated that the hazardous areas were effectively neutralized. Debris removal, combined with community awareness and monitoring protocols, drastically reduced the likelihood of cub injuries from environmental hazards. Emma, David, and Caleb surveyed the transformed zones, a mix of relief and pride evident in their expressions. The work had addressed not just the immediate threat to Simba and other cubs, but had created lasting safeguards for the ecosystem. Simba's progress mirrored the success of the restoration efforts. From a critically injured, traumatized cub, he had grown into a resilient, alert, and healthy young lion. His amber eyes, once clouded with pain and fear, now reflected curiosity, intelligence, and the raw vitality of life in the savannah. Observers noted his playful interactions, exploratory behavior, and developing strength, hallmarks of a cub preparing for reintegration into the wild. Emma reflected on the journey, recognizing the delicate balance between human intervention and natural processes. Every action, from surgery to habitat restoration, had consequences, and success required thoughtful coordination, patience, and respect for the ecosystem. Simba's recovery and the rehabilitation of the surrounding environment represented more than a single life saved. They were proof that knowledge, compassion, and strategic effort could transform challenges into lasting conservation outcomes. 6 months had passed since Simba's first cries echoed across the Masai Mara. The cub, now nearly fully grown, was strong, agile, and alert, a lion transformed not only by recovery, but by the care and careful planning of those who had nurtured him. Emma and David, alongside Dr. Makina and Caleb, stood at the edge of a remote section of the reserve, the sun casting long shadows over the golden grass. The transport crate was positioned carefully at the designated release site, selected for its proximity to a bachelor group of young male lions. The plan was meticulous, a controlled reintroduction that balanced freedom with safety, using supplemental feeding stations discreetly positioned to ease Simba's transition back into the wild. Emma's heart pounded. The months of observation, treatment, rehabilitation, and habitat restoration had all led to this moment. She glanced at David, who gave her a reassuring nod. Together, they represented a bridge between medical intervention and ecological expertise, their collaboration a living testament to the importance of interdisciplinary conservation efforts. At Makina's signal, the crate door was raised remotely. For a few long, suspended seconds, Simba hesitated. He paused at the threshold, nostrils flaring as he absorbed the scents and sounds of the open savannah. The scarred side of his face caught the morning light, a visible mark of both suffering endured and survival achieved. His amber eyes flickered between the humans who had saved him and the expansive landscape that was his ancestral home. Then, with deliberate dignity and cautious curiosity, Simba stepped forward. His movements were measured but confident, muscles rippling beneath his tawny coat as he traversed the grass, gradually blending with the environment that had once been his domain. The release was more than a symbolic gesture. It was the culmination of a process that integrated veterinary care, habitat restoration, and community engagement. Emma and David watched silently, aware that every decision over the previous months had contributed to this critical moment. Simba's cautious exploration of his surroundings reflected both instinct and learning, a hybrid of natural resilience and human-facilitated rehabilitation. Over the following days, tracking devices provided detailed updates on Simba's movements. Reports indicated successful hunting attempts, growing confidence, and careful territorial expansion. Initial interactions with the local bachelor group were tentative, marked by cautious glances and measured displays of dominance. But over time, wariness gave way to cautious acceptance, the group adapting to Simba's presence without aggressive conflict. Observers noted subtle signs of integration, shared watering spots, coordinated movement across shared hunting grounds, and gradual behavioral synchronization. Emma spent hours reviewing the tracking data, cross-referencing movements with environmental variables such as prey distribution, water availability, and terrain hazards. Each analysis confirmed that the strategic planning had paid off. Supplemental feeding stations had eased his initial transition, habitat restoration had reduced the risk of injury, and careful monitoring had allowed immediate response if any unforeseen complications arose. Beyond the success of Simba's reintroduction, the broader implications became apparent. The habitat restoration work had reduced environmental hazards across multiple sections of the reserve, benefiting not only Simba but other wildlife that shared his territory. Education programs had fostered a sense of stewardship within local communities, empowering them to monitor for injuries, report suspicious human activity, and understand the importance of ecological balance. The cumulative effect was a measurable improvement in both safety and awareness, reinforcing the interconnectedness of human action and wildlife resilience. Emma reflected on the journey from the moment she first heard Simba's cries. The ethical dilemmas, the tense rescue, the surgical interventions, and the painstaking habitat restoration were all part of a broader narrative, a story of resilience, compassion, and proactive conservation. Each step required careful consideration of both immediate and long-term consequences, emphasizing the delicate balance between human influence and natural processes. David joined her on the observation platform overlooking Simba's territory. The sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the savannah, painting shadows that shifted with the rhythm of the land. "He's doing well," David remarked quietly. "The integration is going smoothly." Emma nodded, her gaze following the cub as he stalked a small herd of Thompson's gazelle in a display of innate hunting skill. "It's more than doing well," she replied. "He's thriving. And the reserve, the whole ecosystem has changed because of this process. It's a ripple effect." Indeed, the ripple effect was evident in every corner of the Mara. Other cubs, once vulnerable to environmental hazards, were now safer due to cleared debris and monitored hazard zones. Local guides reported fewer incidents of injury among wildlife, and the lessons learned in Simba's rehabilitation had informed protocols for veterinary care, reintroduction planning, and habitat management throughout the reserve. Conservation, Emma realized, was not merely about saving one life. It was about creating systems that sustained life. As the months continued, Simba expanded his territory, establishing a small but viable range near a watering hole. Observers documented hunting proficiency, social interactions, and exploratory behavior consistent with natural development. While cautious initially, the cub, now a young lion, demonstrated resilience, adaptability, and the instinctual intelligence that marked a healthy, integrated predator. Emma's meticulous records showed steady growth, increased stamina, and the development of behaviors necessary for survival in the wild. The story of Simba also had broader implications beyond the Mara. The rehabilitation and reintroduction process became a case study in integrated conservation strategy, illustrating how veterinary intervention, habitat restoration, and community engagement could work in harmony to protect endangered species. Reports circulated within global wildlife organizations, highlighting lessons learned and protocols that could be adapted in similar ecosystems. Emma, David, and McKenna contributed research papers and field reports, emphasizing evidence-based practices and the ethical imperative to balance intervention with respect for natural processes. Yet, amidst the technical success, there was a deeper, more profound observation. Simba's journey represented hope, a tangible demonstration that compassion, expertise, and persistence could mitigate suffering caused by both natural and human factors. Each step, from the initial rescue to the final reintroduction, reflected a narrative of resilience, not just in the cub, but in the human capacity to act responsibly in the face of adversity. In the quiet of the late afternoon, Emma and David stood watching Simba from a ridge. He paused briefly, his gaze lifting toward them, as if acknowledging their role in his survival. Then, with a powerful stretch and a low, resonant roar, he announced his presence to the world. It was a roar devoid of pain or fear, a sound that spoke instead of strength, courage, and life reclaimed. Emma felt a lump rise in her throat, not just for Simba, but for every animal whose survival depended on human vigilance and care. The experience catalyzed change across the reserve. Policies were updated, hazard zones were mapped and restored, and community outreach became an ongoing part of conservation strategy. Monitoring programs were expanded, and educational initiatives ensured that local populations understood the importance of protecting wildlife. Simba's life had been a catalyst for a network of interventions that would benefit countless others for years to come, demonstrating that a single act of compassion could ripple outward to create meaningful systemic change. Emma finally allowed herself to rest, her mind reflecting on the journey. From the initial cry across the savannah to the successful reintegration of Simba into the wild, the story had encompassed fear, urgency, hope, and triumph. It was a testament to the resilience of life, the efficacy of thoughtful intervention, and the interconnectedness of humans and nature. The African savannah, vast and untamed, had become a canvas for a narrative that combined science, empathy, and perseverance. Simba, now a fully capable young lion, had transformed from a helpless, injured cub into a symbol of recovery and hope. His scar, once a reminder of human cruelty and environmental hazards, now gleamed in the sun as a badge of survival, strength, and resilience. Simba's journey reminds us that one life can inspire profound change. Through careful intervention, habitat restoration, and collaborative conservation efforts, even the most vulnerable creatures can thrive, and ecosystems can be protected for future generations. This story illustrates the power of knowledge, compassion, and action, proving that humans have the ability to heal not only individual lives, but the environment itself. If this story touched your heart and inspired you, subscribe, like, and share to support wildlife conservation efforts. Every action contributes to awareness, protection, and the hope that other Simba-like stories can unfold across the wild landscapes of our planet. Join the movement to safeguard wildlife and witness the incredible power of resilience and care in the natural world.